Mia had spent the whole morning preparing, not for a party, not for friends, just for one man. The man she had promised to love in sickness and in health. The one who once danced with her barefoot in the kitchen at midnight when they couldn't afford dinner out. It was their 10th anniversary, a milestone she clung to as a sign that maybe, just maybe, things were getting better. She wore the soft blue sweater he used to say made her look like a breath of spring, even though it hung looser now after the weight loss from her accident recovery. Her hands trembled slightly as she curled her hair with slow precision. Still weak, still relearning control, but determined. She had arranged their tiny dining table with the good plates they only used twice a year, lit candles that flickered cheerfully against the window glass, and carefully baked his favorite lemon tart from scratch, despite the burns on her forearm from a slip at the oven. By 7 p.m., everything was ready. By 8, she thought maybe he was just late. By 9, her smile had dulled, and by 10:30, the dog had curled at her feet in silence as she sat unmoving in her chair, staring at the door with hope melting into dread. No calls. No messages. Her phone lay on the table beside the unused wine glasses, screen dark, its silence screaming louder with every passing minute. She had every reason to think he'd walk in with some excuse, maybe even flowers, and she'd pretend not to care that he forgot again. Because that's what love sometimes required. But at 11:52 p.m., the lock finally turned. She straightened instinctively, brushing her skirt smooth, heart surging against her better judgment. David stepped in without urgency, no rush in his eyes, no apology on his face. He didn't even glance at the table. A duffel bag hung from his shoulder, not like someone coming home, but like someone leaving. "We need to talk," he said, voice flat. No hugs, no explanations. She blinked at him. "Can it wait till morning?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head. "This isn't working anymore. I can't do this. You know that. And I'm sorry, I really am. But I didn't sign up to be a nurse." The words hit her like a slap. Clean, cruel, and practiced. Her accident 18 months ago had changed everything. A rainy day, a truck that never stopped, 2 surgeries, a wheelchair, and more pain than she'd ever imagined a body could hold. But she hadn't given up. She was learning hand controls for the car, doing remote work as a design assistant, even started painting again with a strapped brush when her fingers couldn't grip. She was building something, but apparently he didn't see it. "There's someone else," he added, like tossing salt into an open wound. "She makes me feel alive, like I'm not drowning in pity every day." The words weren't loud, but they echoed. Alive, as if Mia were a tombstone now, a placeholder for the woman he used to love. She felt something inside her quiet, not break, but settle, like stone beneath a storm. "I made dinner," she said simply, staring at the tart. "You didn't even look." He blinked, as if remembering he was standing in a life he once chose. "I'm sorry, Mia," he said again, but it was hollow, routine, something he'd practiced. She asked him if he would stay, just one last night. For the anniversary, for the 10 years, for dignity. He looked uncomfortable, adjusted his grip on the bag, and shook his head. "I think it's best I go now." He walked out without touching a single thing, not even the dog that whimpered when the door closed. Midnight struck as Mia sat frozen in her chair, the candles now pools of wax, the tart still untouched. For a long time, she didn't move. She didn't cry. She simply stared at the door as if something invisible had been ripped from her chest and taken with him. Her eyes drifted to the bouquet she'd placed on the windowsill, white lilies, fragile but proud, and something in her began to stir, Not anger, not despair, just a slow, pulsing whisper deep in her gut. Then I'll learn to walk again, just not toward you. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she wheeled herself to the window, stared into the dark, and repeated it like a promise. Not a vow to prove him wrong, but to prove herself right. She had survived worse than loneliness. Now she would survive this. The next morning, Mia's body ached from lack of sleep, but her mind had already crossed some invisible threshold. There were no more tears, no begging for closure. David had made his choice, and whatever hope she clung to had dissolved with the sound of the door closing behind him. Her home felt different now, still filled with his smell, his leftover shoes by the door, and the gray hoodie slung over the back of the chair. But no longer his. It was hers now. Solely hers. She spent the day doing the things she hadn't done in weeks, not out of grief, but as a form of reclaiming. She wheeled into the bedroom and gathered all his things into 2 large plastic bags, shirts, razors, chargers, photos, and left them by the door. The kitchen was hers again, so she scrubbed it until her arms trembled. She deleted his name from her phone, from the emergency contacts on her health app, even from the shared streaming services. She was methodical, cold, and surgical with every click. The moment that finally cracked something open, though, came not from the apartment, but from a screen. At 4:13 p.m., she got an email from a woman named Gwen. The subject line read, "I watched your talk. Thank you." At first, Mia assumed it was spam, but then she remembered, a year ago, as part of her physical therapy journey, her counselor had encouraged her to share her experience in a small online support group. The clip had been uploaded to a YouTube page run by the rehab center. She had forgotten all about it. Curiosity took over. She opened YouTube and typed her name. There it was. Life After the Chair. Mia Brennan's story. 42 minutes long. Only a few hundred views. She clicked on it and watched herself appear on screen. Pale, tired, but full of quiet determination. She spoke about the guilt of surviving, the feeling of being a burden, the strange silence of people who didn't know what to say, and the one sentence she remembered verbatim. I may never walk again, but I will rise in every other way that counts. Mia watched herself say those words and realized something shocking. She had meant them. Maybe more then than now. Maybe more now than then. And the comment section? Not a war zone. It was kind, supportive. People called her brave, inspiring, real. Dozens of strangers from all over had watched and felt moved. She spent the evening reading every comment, replying to some, crying a little, not from sadness, but something warmer. Acknowledgement. Then, at 8:29 p.m., a message appeared in her inbox. No subject line, just, "Would love to talk. Your words stayed with me." The sender? Logan R. She clicked on the name. No profile picture, just an email address linked to a corporate domain. Curious but cautious, she replied, "Hi, Logan? I'm flattered. May I ask what stayed with you?" Within minutes, he wrote back. "The way you said dignity isn't something you beg for. That shook something loose in me." She stared at those words. No one had ever quoted her before, and definitely not something like that. They exchanged a few more messages that night. Short, thoughtful, strangely easy. Logan didn't ask personal questions. He just responded. Softly, intelligently, with the kind of empathy that didn't feel performative. He told her he was in corporate leadership, but didn't say more. She didn't push. It was strange and new, but it didn't feel threatening. It felt refreshing. When she closed her laptop that night, the apartment still felt empty, but her chest did not. For the first time since the accident, and maybe even before it, Mia felt like she was being seen. Not as someone who needed to be rescued, not as someone to pity, just a woman. A woman who had been hurt, yes, but not erased. The next morning she replied again, and then again the next day. She didn't know what Logan looked like, or what he really did, or why he'd reached out. But she did know one thing. Someone out there had seen her story, not just watched it, and that was enough to make her feel like maybe this life still held things worth waking up for. David may have left, but something else had just arrived. Quieter, unexpected, but real. And she wasn't going to close the door on it. One afternoon, after a particularly long exchange where he talked about shame, she searched his name. Just to know? Just once. Logan R. It led her to an article in a business magazine. Nothing flashy, just a small profile piece about an anonymous donor who had helped fund a spinal injury support foundation in the Midwest. He'd made a fortune in tech years ago, had mostly disappeared from the spotlight. She read that article 3 times, and then she read the byline, the full name. Logan Reeve, the same name on the company email domain from those first few messages. She sat back in her chair, heart racing. The man she'd been talking to for weeks, who sent her poems and voice notes about grief and resilience, was the CEO of a billion-dollar firm. A billionaire. But he hadn't mentioned it once. No flex, no hint, not even a whisper. She could have missed it entirely if she hadn't been curious. She didn't reply to his last message that day. Not yet. She needed time to think. What did he want? Why her? What was this? That night she listened to one of his old voice notes again. In it, he said, "Some of us have everything money can buy and still feel invisible. I think you understand that in a way most people never will." She hadn't understood the full weight of that line until now. The next day, she responded, "I Googled you. I know who you are." His reply came slower than usual. "Okay," he wrote. Then another message. "Does it change how you see me?" She sat with that question for a while. Finally, she wrote, "Only if it changes how you see me." A long pause. Then, "It doesn't. It won't." Logan didn't send her flowers or offers to fly her anywhere. Instead, he asked if he could send her a book. Not a fancy one, just a copy of something that helped him after his father died. She agreed. It arrived in 2 days. Inside was a handwritten note. "You are not the version of yourself that was left. You are the one that kept going." No signature. Just that. Mia held that note like it was gold. And maybe for the first time in a long time she believed it. Not because someone rich told her she was worthy, but because someone kind did. Mia hadn't intended to let it go on past a few emails, but Logan wrote like someone who didn't just read words. He heard them. Every morning for the next 2 weeks, she woke up to a simple, carefully typed message. Sometimes a quote about resilience, sometimes a thought on silence or guilt, or the loneliness that hides inside even the happiest photos. He never asked for selfies. Never called her brave in a way that felt like a pat on the head. He just replied with things like, "That line about the lemon tart, that stayed with me." Or, "When you said healing doesn't always come with applause, I felt that." It was like she'd been holding her breath since the accident. And only now, with this man she couldn't see, was she finally letting it out. Their conversation moved off email and into a private messaging app. And from there, to voice notes. Logan's voice wasn't what she'd imagined. It was lower, slower, like someone who had been through things and now chose his words with care. She told him about her garden, her first attempt at walking between the couch and the counter with braces and crutches. He listened. And when she said she felt ridiculous for how proud it made her, he replied, "You should frame that moment. Not just remember it. Frame it." Mia started to look forward to the sound of her phone buzzing, but the strangest part came not from his words, but from her own curiosity. It arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered by a courier with no uniform and no return address. Just a slim, cream-colored envelope pressed carefully into Mia's palm. She was in the middle of stretching exercises when the knock came. The man didn't say a word, just nodded and walked away, as if disappearing was part of the instructions. Mia stared at it for a long time after the door closed. Her name was written in delicate black ink, Mia Brennan. No title, no flourish. The paper was thick, expensive. Inside was something that felt oddly weighted. Her hands trembled as she opened it, not from fear but a strange mix of dread and anticipation. But when she slid out the contents, her breath caught. Inside was a folded check. And not just any check, a cashier's check, with her name printed on the pay to the order of line. And the amount? $250,000. The note attached was shorter than any of Logan's previous messages. Just 8 words. Use this however you want. You earned it. No signature, no explanation, no request, just the check. For 20 minutes, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at it like it might vanish. Her heart pounded. Her stomach turned. She couldn't process it. It didn't feel real. Who gives $250,000 to someone they've never even met in person? She didn't want it to be a test. She didn't want to feel like she'd been someone's charity case. She didn't want to think she had been inspiring in a way that demanded a reward. So instead of calling Logan, or messaging, or anything, she placed the envelope in the drawer with the scissors and rubber bands and quietly made herself tea. When the steam arose, she sat down and stared into the mug as if it held answers. Part of her wanted to rip the check up. Another part wanted to cash it and move somewhere no one knew her name. But the biggest part, the one that had stayed silent for months, just wanted to know why. So she called him. First time, no voice note, no text, a real call. He picked up on the second ring, his voice quiet. "Mia." "What is this?" she asked, not angry, but direct. "It's not a payment," he said. "It's not a prize. It's not because you're broken or brave or anything else people like to write under stories like yours. It's because when I was in the hospital after my car crash, I needed someone to tell me I wasn't a ghost. You did that, for me and for others. I have more money than I need. You have courage most people don't, that's all." "You can't just—" she started. "I know," he interrupted. "But I can try to do something right with what I have. You said once, dignity is never begged for. You didn't beg. You gave it through that video. This is me saying I saw it." She was quiet. So was he. "You don't owe me anything," he added gently. "Cash it, tear it up, frame it, burn it, but don't question why you were worth it." Her throat tightened. She whispered, "I don't even know you." "You know enough," he said. "Enough to see that what happened to you didn't erase you. It revealed you, and I think the world needs more of that." She ended the call before she could cry. That night she didn't sleep again. But not from sadness this time, from something like fire. The next morning she didn't cash the check. Not yet. Instead she opened her old laptop, cleared off the files from her design internship, and wrote a proposal. A digital community, for people like her. Not just the injured, but the ones left behind. Emotionally, physically, financially. People who weren't given answers, or apologies, or second chances. People who just needed a place to be seen. She named it Still Standing. She didn't know if it would work, but she knew why she was building it. Not for Logan. Not for David. For every person who had ever been told, silently or out loud, that their life was now something less. She opened the drawer, looked at the check, and finally smiled. It wasn't money, it was permission. And she didn't need it. But it helped. 2 months later, the website was live. Still Standing launched quietly. No flashy ads, no paid influencers, just a few honest posts and a video of Mia speaking into her kitchen webcam with nothing but a linen curtain behind her. She talked about how healing isn't a straight line, about how people disappear when they don't know what to say, and how silence can hurt more than words. The site was simple, a place to write, connect, support. Within 3 weeks, she had over 8,000 subscribers. Some sent their own stories. Some just wrote, "Thank you." And then, one evening, while checking the new signups, she noticed a domain she hadn't seen before, revenagroup.com. It wasn't a name she recognized at first, but something about it pulled at her memory. She Googled it. Her screen filled with results. Revoni Group, a multinational conglomerate, headquarters in Chicago, founder and CEO, David Brennan's new boss, her ex-husband's company, the one he used to brag about joining. Mia stared at the screen. Her stomach twisted. Was this a coincidence? A glitch? She clicked on the username attached to the sign-up. Just 2 letters, LR. She froze. Not because she was afraid, but because something in her heart already knew. Logan hadn't just sent her money, he had signed up, he had watched, and now somehow her story had threaded its way back into the world she thought she'd left behind. The next day, she received a request for an interview from a daytime talk show. "A new voice for those who refuse to disappear," the subject line read. At first, she almost deleted it. Then she clicked. The email was genuine. They'd seen Still Standing. They'd seen her video. They wanted her to appear live. She hesitated. Her legs still trembled when she stood for too long. Her voice cracked when she got too nervous. But something inside her whispered, "This is what it's for." So she said yes. The morning of the taping, she sat in the green room, hands shaking in her lap, staring at her reflection. Her scars were visible now. She didn't hide them. The producer came in, smiling. "You have a fan in the control room," she said. "Someone from the Reveni Group insisted we feature you." Mia's chest went tight. She smiled politely, but she knew. She wheeled onto that stage under the bright lights, cameras clicking, audience clapping. And when the host leaned in and said, "Mia, your story has inspired thousands, maybe more. What kept you going when everything fell apart?" Mia didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She looked straight into the lens and said, "Because I was more than what he left. And because someone reminded me, quietly, without asking for anything, that being left behind doesn't mean being erased." The audience erupted. Later, backstage, she received a small note from the producer. No card, no signature. Just a folded page from a hotel pad. It read, "You didn't need me. You never did. But I'm grateful I saw you before the world did." That night, as the episode aired, her phone buzzed, over and over, and then one name appeared. One she hadn't seen since that awful anniversary. David Brennan. She let it ring. She let it ring until it stopped. Then, just out of curiosity, she turned on the TV. A local business news channel was covering the segment. The headline read, "Still Standing founder Mia Brennan's viral story more than a movement." And beside it, in a shot from earlier that day, was Mia. Sitting tall, smiling, aglow under the stage lights. In the corner of the screen stood a man in a black suit, watching from the audience, expression unreadable. David. Seeing her. Finally. But not as a wife, as a force. Not the one he left, but the one the world now refused to ignore. The following morning, the world had changed again. But not in the way it had after the accident, or even after Logan's envelope. This time, the change was public. Her inbox overflowed, her website crashed from traffic, hundreds of new messages, thousands of new subscribers. But it wasn't until her phone rang, and she saw the name, David Brennan, again, that she felt the past trying to catch up. She let it go to voicemail. Then again. And again. By the fourth call, she answered. Not out of fear, out of curiosity. Mia. His voice was tentative, like he wasn't sure if he'd dialed correctly. I saw you on TV. I figured, she replied, calm. It's everywhere. A long pause. You look strong. I am, she said, meaning it more than she expected. Mia, He trailed off, then started again. I want to say I'm sorry, for how things ended. Ended? She said, tone firm. You mean when you walked out on our anniversary, after the doctor said my legs wouldn't work the same again? I panicked. I was selfish. I thought I wasn't strong enough to stay. You weren't, she said flatly. And now you want what? Absolution? No, he said. I want to help. I can invest in your platform. Still standing. I watched the whole site. It's incredible. You've built something real. She laughed, not kindly. You want to buy in? No, not buy. Support. I owe you. At least let me do something right. Mia closed her eyes. The audacity of it burned, but not in a painful way. In a way that clarified. David, this isn't about guilt or debt. You don't get to insert yourself into the version of me that rose after you left. But, no, she cut him off. You lost the right to be part of my story the night you left. And now that the world sees me, you want to too? That's not how this works. Mia, I didn't call to hurt you. You didn't call to heal either. You called because you feel small now. And you should sit with that, David, the way I had to sit with your absence. She hung up before he could reply. Then she powered off her phone. Not out of spite, but peace. Later that day, her lawyer, someone she'd hired after the site went viral, called to tell her about a potential brand deal. A publisher, a podcast. People wanted to license Still Standing's name. She listened, nodded, but all she could think about was how much clarity that one call had brought. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need David to apologize. She had outgrown the version of herself who waited for that. She didn't even tell Logan about the call. Not because she was hiding it, but because it didn't matter anymore. Her story wasn't about the man who left. It was about the woman who stayed, who rebuilt, who gave voice to thousands like her. That night, in bed, she finally let herself cry. Not out of grief, out of gratitude, for what she lost, for what she found, and for the truth she now carried like armor. Being discarded doesn't make you worthless. It makes you dangerous to the ones who thought you'd disappear. The studio wasn't what she imagined. No giant glass windows or sleek marble floors, just soundproofed walls, a round table, and 2 soft chairs under warm lights. But it was hers. Still standing. The podcast had launched after a well-known production company offered to co-produce it under Mia's direction. They gave her full control. Guests, topics, tone. She kept it raw. Real. Her very first guest was a nurse who lost her job after an accident left her with a permanent tremor. The second was a father whose wife left after he chose to stay home with their autistic son. No fluff, no filters, just the pain and the path forward. Mia didn't speak from a pedestal. She spoke from the scars. And somehow that made everyone open up. The world wasn't used to hearing from people like her. Not in this way. She didn't sound like a victim. She didn't posture as a hero. She was them. And every episode felt like a mirror someone had finally cleaned. The numbers exploded. Within 3 weeks, they had a waiting list of guests. Within 6, they had sponsorships. Within 3 months, Still Standing was featured on Apple's top 10. And yet, she never stopped responding to the comments, the emails, the letters from women in wheelchairs and men going through silent divorces. People who had been made invisible, now clinging to every word Mia spoke like it was oxygen. But with visibility came more than applause. One morning, just before recording episode 11, her producer came in with a strange look. "You're trending," she said. "On Twitter, and not just your show. Him." Mia took the phone. The screen showed a clip from a recent board meeting at Ravoni Group, David's company. The headline read, "CEO's ex-wife breaks silence, builds empire. Ex-husband calls it an important conversation." And below that, the quote from David's statement. "Maya's voice was something I didn't hear clearly until the world did. She's reshaping how we talk about dignity, and I support her fully." Mia blinked. The words weren't cruel, they weren't fake, but they weren't for her either. They were for his redemption arc. She sat down slowly, scrolling through the comments. Most were on her side. He didn't deserve her. Too little, too late. This is her moment, not his. But one comment hit her square in the chest. It simply read, "Forgiveness isn't the point. Growth is?" That afternoon, she started episode 11 with a pause. Then she said, "Today, I'm not going to tell someone else's story. I'm going to tell you mine. Not the pain of being left, but the fire of being found by myself." And for the next 30 minutes, she told it all. The anniversary, the silence, the envelope, the phone call. And the moment she realized she wasn't building a career, she was rebuilding truth. "This podcast isn't here to fix broken people," she said in the final minute. "It's here to remind them they were never broken to begin with, just unseen. And I see you, every single one of you." When she stopped recording, her producer was crying. "You just changed the whole season," she whispered. Mia smiled. "No," she said. "I just finally joined it." She was waiting outside the cafe before Mia even arrived, the kind of woman who looked like she'd walked through a storm and still managed to keep her scarf in place. Mid-50s, firm posture, piercing green eyes that had clearly seen too much. Mia approached cautiously, unsure if she was meeting a fan or someone else entirely. "You're Mia Brennan," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Mia nodded. "I'm Nora Lang. I used to be married to Logan." The words hit like a slap, but not out of malice, out of sheer weight. Mia stood still. Logan had never mentioned a previous marriage, never hinted at the kind of past that would show up wearing red wool and a ring that was now missing from her left hand. "Can we talk?" Nora asked. They sat across from each other, two women separated by time and love, but bound by something quieter, understanding. "He watched you every week," Nora said, her voice low, "before he ever spoke to you. I saw your first video on his laptop when I came to drop off our divorce papers. You were still— We were already done," she cut in gently, "but not on paper. He didn't cheat, if that's what you're asking. He wouldn't, not after everything." Mia didn't know what to say. "He told me once," Nora went on, stirring her tea slowly, "that he stayed with me out of guilt. My illness had changed things. But when he met you, when he saw you standing back up when everyone had turned away, he said he finally understood what grace looked like." Mia blinked hard. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he's dying," Nora said. The words were airless. "Pancreatic, late stage. He didn't want you to know. Said he didn't want pity or to take up space in your story. But you should know. Because you're the only thing he did right at the end. Mia felt the world tilt again. He wrote the envelope because he knew he was sick? Yes, and he kept watching. He sent donations through other names. He even helped fund your podcast, quietly, anonymously, through my old publishing account. Why? Mia whispered. Because he believed in you more than he believed in anything else, Nora said, including himself. They sat in silence. The cafe noise dimmed around them. He's at St. Anne's, Nora finally said, standing. He may not last the week. Mia reached across the table, grabbed her hand. Thank you for telling me. Thank you, Nora said back, for giving him something to believe in before the end. That night, Mia didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and remembered every moment that had led her here. The accident, the lemon tart, the envelope, the studio, the stage, and now, a hospital bed. She didn't know what she'd say to him, didn't know if she could. But she knew this. Still standing was never just her story. It had always been a chorus of survivors, even the ones who didn't survive their own shame. So she packed a small bag, put on the same soft blue sweater she'd worn the day David left, and headed out. This time not in grief, not in anger, but in answer to a debt that didn't need repayment, only closure. She almost turned back when she saw the building. There was something about hospital doors that always made her feel smaller, like they could still strip away everything she had rebuilt. But she went in, gave the name, took the elevator, and stepped into room 407 as if she belonged there. Logan lay against white pillows, thinner than she remembered, skin pale and drawn tight against the bones in his face. The fourth hummed softly beside him. His eyes were closed. Mia stood in the doorway, hand clutching her coat like it was armor. She didn't want pity. Not from him, not from herself. You came, he said without opening his eyes. She smiled faintly. Of course I did. He opened them slowly, like it cost him something. You look like success. I look like grief, she corrected. You taught me how to wear both. He tried to laugh, but winced instead. Always the truth teller. You should have told me, she said, voice calm. I would have come sooner. I didn't want to interrupt the way you were rising. That wasn't your decision, she said, walking to the chair beside him. You were part of the rise. Not enough, he whispered. More than you know. They sat in silence for a long while. The beeping of the monitor filled the space between breaths. You were the first person who didn't look at me and see damage, she said. You saw potential, and then you gave it room to grow. You made it grow, he said. I just lit the match. She reached for his hand. It was cold, but he didn't let go. I wanted to build something before I left, he said. Something good, something that might last longer than I do. You did, she replied. You gave people like me a voice. That lasts. I gave you a voice, he said with a faint smile. Everyone else just realized they needed to listen. Tears pooled but didn't fall. She wouldn't cry for death. She would cry for life. For the strange, quiet man who gave anonymously and asked for nothing in return. Can I read you something? She asked. He nodded. She pulled out a worn piece of paper. Her first blog post. The one he had commented on, anonymously. She read it aloud, her voice steady, slow. By the end, he was asleep. But there was a smile on his lips. She didn't wake him. She sat there for hours, holding his hand, the weight of 100 moments pressing down. There were no grand confessions, no melodrama, just presence, just truth. When the nurse came in later to check his vitals, she mouthed the words, "Not much time." Mia nodded. Can I stay? Please do, the nurse whispered. So she did. Through the night, through the silence, through the end, if it came, because some men leave, and some men give, then disappear without asking to be named, and Mia, who had once been discarded, now carried the dignity of every broken part that had ever healed. The auditorium lights dimmed as the music faded, and the audience settled into a hush. Mia stood at the edge of the stage, her hands steady, a mic pinned discreetly to her blouse. Behind her, the soft-lit banner of Still Standing Live stretched high, her platform's first in-person summit. Hundreds of survivors filled the seats, women, men, teenagers, elderly couples, all wearing the silver pins they'd received at check-in. The pins read, "Still here. Still whole." This moment wasn't about her anymore, but she knew she had to start it. She stepped forward into the light. "When I began Still Standing, I didn't imagine this," she said softly, her voice echoing gently through the room. "I was in a wheelchair, half-heartedly trying to blog while grieving a husband who left. I thought the best part of me had ended on a hospital bed. But someone showed me I was wrong." She paused, eyes scanning the front row, where one chair sat empty, draped in a folded blue sweater. Logan's sweater. The one she wore the day he left the envelope. The one she wore when she found her voice. "Someone I barely knew changed everything by seeing me not as broken, but as becoming." The audience listened, breathless, some already wiping tears. "That man," she continued, "passed away 3 weeks ago. He wasn't a husband or a relative. He wasn't even someone who stayed long in my life. But he gave anonymously, listened quietly, and reminded me that silence isn't absence. It can be faith." Her voice caught for a moment. She let it, then pressed forward. "Tonight isn't about pain. It's about presence, about what happens when we choose not to vanish after being hurt, but instead rise, publicly, unapologetically, with scars exposed." She lifted a hand slightly. On screen behind her appeared dozens of faces, her podcast guests, her community, her people. "If you are here," she said, "you are already more than your story. You are its proof." A standing ovation followed. She let it wash over her, not as applause, as affirmation. After the event, in the quiet of backstage, she sat beside the empty chair, pulled out a smaller envelope this time, one she'd written. Inside was a card. It read, "Thank you for seeing me before I saw myself." She placed it under the sweater, then stood, exhaled, and walked toward the future. Mia Brennan, once left on the anniversary of a life she'd imagined, had now lived something far more powerful than vows. She'd built a legacy, not one of revenge or vindication, but of reclamation, of power, of voice, of choosing not just to survive, but to shine. And as she stepped back out to greet the attendees, every footstep echoed not with pain, but with pride. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on General Common Tales. If you were in that room, watching her speak, would you have stood too? Tell us in the comments.